Hey guys, welcome to week 5 of the Ethics of Nature and your little YouTube video. I hope everyone's doing well and that you're having a good week so far. I'm looking forward to reading what you guys come up with for the forum. So today we're going to be talking about a couple of different things from Green. First of all, we're going to start with the concept that the way that we punish people who break the law, people who are rude, or that we don't really want as part of our group, is indicative of certain moral tendencies within our tribe. In other words, it tells us something about ourselves. We can learn from whether we use capital punishment and kill people who we have broken our laws, whether we exclude or marginalize people that aren't like us, or whether we try to correct behavior by pointing out ways in which it could be better or be more inclusive, or ultimately try to restore damage that has been done through methods and mechanisms of restorative justice. So Green begins these next sections pointing out that tribalism is just something that we have to deal with. Just the same way that we're mortal and we all have to die someday, right? And we are going to suffer. We are going to make mistakes and hurt people. In the same way that this is true, we are all also to some extent ethnocentric. It's a human universal. People just favor in-group members. But remember that what's interesting about this is that who the members of our in-group are not fixed. So in other words, humans aren't hardwired to be racist or hardwired to be sexist or hardwired to be, pro Montreal Canadiens. We're just hardwired to have in groups and out groups. And historically, these have been structured by different kinds of social conditions and economic and political conditions. So what we do is we look at the conditions and we think, okay, people who were victimized by a race-based system of slavery, and we outgroup them and in-grouped white Euro descendants. So therefore, racism is universal. No, it's just how we categorized people at that time. The Europeans came to North America and wanted to colonize, and they had all these different religious projects and competing economic motivations. And so they marginalized and created a system of social relations and a power imbalance around indigenous people who already lived here, right? But it's not to say that racism itself was some sort of innate human universal. So just make sure that you have that in your mind. That being said, the in-group, out-group thing is real. It's so real that we can measure the amount of oxytocin, right, this pleasure center in our brain that's rewarded when we interact with and mutually support and nourish our tribal groups, right? So, hopefully we're all on the same page about this. So Green's question then is, we live in a modern world where there are a number of different groups living in the same spaces. What happens if we're these tribal primates and now tribes are crunched right together and having to make decisions together? So, as you recall, he moves on to a number of things from game theory. A number of experiments that cognitive psychologists and behaviorists designed to try to understand how humans grew to be more cooperative, right? So there's the ultimatum game, which, as you remember, is like, you find $100 on the street. It's up to you to decide how much to give to your buddy. But if he refuses, you both get nothing, right? So you have to strategize about how to get to keep the most, right? But to prevent a conflict from arising, which would, destroy both of your options to benefit from this scenario. So, this is played out in different ways in different cultures. There's the public goods game, right? Where each person gives money to a pot, right? And then that pot multiplies depending on how much money is put inside it, right? Like much like the way a tax system works. So you have to figure out how much you can keep and how much you give to the pot and anticipate what that multiplier is, right? So that's another one of these games. And then there's the dictator game, which is basically like, how do you distribute stuff when you control all this stuff? So again, like we said about how we punish people, the society that we live in, the kind of tribe that we inhabit, predicts very reliably how, as individuals, we're going to play these games. Okay, so another element that Green points out that you can look at is different tribes make their livings in different ways, right? Now we can think of artists, writers, like I used to be, these sort of solitary individuals, right? Who have to be very self-reliant, and in terms of how they're generating the ideas and the work that they're using to make a living, right? The analogy in the past would be like kind of more like a herdsman, right? You're alone with your flock. You might have like a little brother or your father or something, but it's probably mostly just your family, and you have to kind of really protect these individual interests. Whereas other activities like whale hunting is the one that he gives, because they did some experiments in these cultures where whale hunting was still practiced. You need a big cooperative collective group to try to take on a whale, right? And other kinds of artists, for example, people who my sister works in the film industry in Los Angeles, people who make movies and television shows and advertisements have to work as a big team in which all of these individuals are absolutely crucial to the outcome, right? You take one group, let's say the costume designer, which is what my sister is, you take her out of the picture and it doesn't work. It doesn't matter how good the actors are or the director, forget it. And it's the same with whale hunting. So, how you make your living, how you become accustomed to working, whether it's part of a large team, whether it's a more individualistic effort, will be determinative of how you play these games, right? So that's kind of to be expected, but it's worth noting. One last thing on that point is that market integration is a good predictor of altruism by the dictator in the dictator game. So what does that mean? Well, in our current modern world, we don't hunt or grow our own food. We go to the grocery store and buy it. Or, if there's a shortage of rice vinegar, we don't get it, right? So I like rice vinegar. I use it in a lot of different recipes, and there's been a shortage, so I've been sad about that. But yeah, so market integration means we live in a very specialized economy where most of us provide sort of service-related labor, in exchange for wages, which we then use to purchase these goods, which are distributed across massive supply chains and end up in our stores, right? So, on some intuitive level, we know that if you drop us into the forest, our chances of building a society or successfully hunting enough food to survive would be pretty low, right? So we all in the modern world, a lot of us understand we're dependent on others, and we need others to thrive and succeed for us to be able to. It's just has to happen that way, right? If a business fails or fails to succeed, then it can have a bad effect on our quality of life. So we typically want these network of businesses to succeed, even though there's lots of competition within each individual field. So what about antisocial behavior? What about people who are extremely selfish and greedy, right? Who try to take more than their share. The free riders, as they're called in anthropology. The non-cooperators. The antisocial people who view the entire social game as kind of rigged against them, and sometimes preferred to act self-destructively, to undermine themselves, right, in order to make a statement or send a signal about how they view the system as a whole. Well, when we come back, we'll discuss those people. Thank you.